Chapter 25. Porthos. Instead of returning directly home, D'Artagnan dismounted at Monsieur de Tréville's door and rapidly ascended the staircase. He was determined to tell him this time all that had occurred. Doubtless the captain would give him good advice in this affair, and as Monsieur de Tréville saw the Queen almost daily, he might draw some information from Her Majesty concerning the poor woman, who was unquestionably being punished for her devotion to her mistress. Monsieur de Tréville listened to the young man's recital with a gravity which proved that he saw something more in this adventure than in Amour, and when D'Artagnan had finished, said he, the savours of his eminence a mile off. But what am I to do? Said D'Artagnan. Nothing, absolutely nothing just now, but leave Paris, as I've told you, as soon as possible. I will see the Queen and tell her the details of the disappearance of this poor woman, of which she is doubtless ignorant, and these details will guide her on her side. And on your return I may possibly have some good news to give you. Trust to me. D'Artagnan knew that, although a Gascon, Monsieur de Tréville was not accustomed to make promises, and that, when by chance he did make one, he always performed it to the full and more. He therefore took his leave, full of gratitude for the past and the future, and the worthy captain who, on his side, felt a lively interest for this brave and resolute young man, affectionately pressed his hand as he wished him a good journey. Determined instantaneously to put Monsieur de Tréville's advice into execution, D'Artagnan hastened toward the Rue des Fossoyeurs to look to the packing of his portmanteau. On approaching number 11, he perceived Monsieur Bonancieux in morning costume standing at his door. Everything that the prudent Planchet had said the evening before about the sinister character of his landlord now recurred to his mind, and he looked at him more attentively than he had ever done before. In fact, besides that yellow sickly paleness which indicates the infiltration of the bile into the blood, and which might only be accidental, D'Artagnan remarked something gruffly perfidious in the wrinkles of his face. A rascal does not laugh in the same manner as an honest man. A hypocrite does not weep with the same kind of tears as a sincere man. All imposture is a mask, and, however well the mask may be made, it may always, with a little attention, be distinguished from the true face. Now it seemed to D'Artagnan that Monsieur Bonancieux wore a mask, and that this mask was a most disagreeable one. He was going, therefore, from his repugnance to the man, to pass by him without speaking, when Monsieur Bonancieux, as on the previous day, addressed him. "Well, young man," said he, "it seems that we are rather late of nights, 7 o'clock in the morning. Plague, it appears that you reverse customs and return home when others emerge." "No one can throw that in your teeth, Monsieur Bonancieux," said the young man. "You are the model of regularity. It is true that when one has a young and pretty wife, one need not run after happiness. Happiness comes home to seek us, does it not, Monsieur Bonancieux?" Bonancieux became pale as death and grinned a horrible smile. Ah, you are a pleasant fellow. But where the plague have you been running this night, my dear master? It appears as if the by-lanes were rather dirty. D'Artagnan lowered his eyes to his own boots, which were covered with mud, but in doing this he happened to look at the shoes and hose of the mercer. One would have said that they had been dipped in the same slough, for both were stained with spots of exactly the same appearance. A sudden idea came across D'Artagnan's mind. That little, fat, gray, short man, like a lackey, clothed in a sad-colored suit, and treated with no sort of respect by the swordsmen of the escort, was Bonancieux himself. The husband had assisted in the abduction of his wife. A strong desire seized D'Artagnan to fly at the mercer's throat and strangle him, but he was a prudent youth, as we have said, and he restrained himself. Nevertheless, his change of countenance was so visible that Bonancieux was frightened, and endeavored to retreat a step or two, but he was exactly before the half of the door that was closed, and the material obstacle which he thus encountered compelled him to keep the same place. "Ah," said D'Artagnan, "you who joke in this manner, my brave fellow, it appears to me that if my boots need a rub of the sponge, your shoes also want a brush. And you've been rambling too, Master Bonancieux. By my faith, it would be quite unpardonable in a man of your age, and who, moreover, has got a wife as pretty as yours is. Oh, mon Dieu, no, said Bonancieux. But yesterday I went to Saint Maud to gain some information concerning a servant whom I cannot do without, and as the roads were dirty, I've collected all this mud, which I have not yet had time to get rid of. The place which Bonancieux had mentioned as the end of his journey was a new proof and confirmation of the suspicions that D'Artagnan had formed. Bonancieux had said Saint Maud because Saint Maud was in exactly opposite direction to Saint Cloud. This probability was the first consolation he had found. If Bonancieux knew where his wife was, it would always be possible, by using extreme measures, to force the mercer to unclose his teeth and let out his secret. The great thing was to change this probability into certainty. "Pardon me, my dear Monsieur Bonancieux," said D'Artagnan, "if I treat you without ceremony, but nothing makes me so thirsty as want of sleep, hence I have a furious thirst. Allow me to beg a glass of water of you. You know you cannot refuse such a thing to a neighbor." And without waiting for the permission of his landlord, D'Artagnan entered the house and cast a hasty glance at the bed. The bed was undisturbed. Bonancieux had not slept in it. He had, therefore, only returned an hour or two before, having accompanied his wife to the place where they had conducted her, or at any rate for the first stage. "Thank you, Monsieur Bonancieux," said D'Artagnan, emptying the glass. "That's all I wanted of you. Now I will go home. I'm going to make Planchet brush my boots, and when he has finished them I will send him, if you like, to brush your shoes." He left the mercer quite stupefied by this singular adieu, and wondering whether he had not run his own neck into a noose. At the top of the stairs he found Planchet, frightened out of his wits. "Ah, sir," cried the lackey as soon as he saw his master, "here indeed is something new, and how long you seemed to me in returning." "What is the matter now?" demanded D'Artagnan. "Ah, I will give you leave to guess 100, nay 1,000 times before you find out the visitor I have received on your behalf during your absence." "When was that?" "About half an hour ago, whilst you were with Monsieur de Tréville." "And who has been here? Come, speak." "Monsieur de Cavois." "Monsieur de Cavois?" "Yes, no other." "The captain of his Eminence's guards?" "Yes, himself." "He came to arrest me?" "I suspected so, sir, in spite of his wheedling way." "He had a wheedling way, do you say?" "That is to say, he was all honey, sir." "Really?" "He said he came from his Eminence, who had the greatest goodwill toward you, to beg you to follow him to the Palais Royal." "And you answered him?" "That the thing was impossible, seeing that you were from home, as he might perceive." "And what did he say then?" "That you must not fail to go there some time during the day." And then he added in a whisper, "Tell your master that his Eminence is perfectly well disposed toward him, and that his fortune probably depends upon this interview." "The snare is unskillful enough for the cardinal," said the young man, smiling. "And as I discovered the snare, I told him that you would be quite in despair on your return." "Where's he gone?" demanded Monsieur de Cavois. "To Troyes in Champagne," I answered. "And where did he go?" says he. "Yesterday evening." "Planchet, my friend," interrupted D'Artagnan, "you are truly a valuable man. You understand, sir, that I thought there would be time enough, if you wished to see Monsieur de Cavois, to give me the lie by saying that you had not gone. It would then be me who had told the lie, and as I am not a gentleman, I may tell lies, you know." "Be easy, Planchet. You shall preserve your reputation as a man of truth. In 1/4 of an hour we will be off." "It was just the advice I was going to offer you, sir." "And where are we going now, if it's not being too curious?" "Egad, exactly the opposite way to which you said I was gone. Besides, you are not in as much anxiety to know what has become of Grimaud, Mousqueton, and Bazin, as I to hear of Athos, Porthos, and Aramis." "Yes, indeed, sir," said Planchet, "and I will set off as soon as you please. The air of the country, I believe, will suit us both better than the air of Paris just now. Therefore, prepare the baggage, Planchet, and let us be off. I will march off first with my hands in my pockets, that there may be no suspicion. You will join me at the Hôtel de Gardes. Apropos, Planchet, I believe that you are right regarding our landlord, and that he is most decidedly a most horrible rascal." Ah, believe me, sir, when I tell you anything in future, I am a physiognomist. D'Artagnan descended first, as was agreed, and that he might have nothing to reproach himself with, he went again to the lodgings of his three friends. But no intelligence of them had been received, only a perfumed letter, most elegantly addressed, had arrived for Aramis. D'Artagnan took charge of it. 10 minutes afterwards, Planchet rejoined him at the stables. D'Artagnan, that no time might be lost, had already settled his own horse. "That will do," said he to Planchet when he had fastened on his valise. "Now saddle the other three and let us be off." "Do you believe we shall travel faster with 2 horses apiece?" asked Planchet with his sharp look. "No, Mr. Jester," replied D'Artagnan, "but with our 4 horses we may bring our 3 friends back, that is, if we can find them." "Which would be a great chance," replied Planchet, "but we must not distrust the mercy of God." "Amen," said D'Artagnan, bestriding his horse. They left the Hôtel de Gardes by the opposite ends of the street, as the one was to quit Paris by the barrier of La Villette, the other by the barrier of Montmartre, to rejoin each other at Saint-Denis. A strategic maneuver which, being punctually executed, was crowned with the most fortunate results. Thus D'Artagnan and Planchet entered Pierrefitte together. Planchet, it must be confessed, was more courageous by day than by night. But yet his natural prudence did not forsake him for an instant. He had forgotten none of the incidents of the former journey, and took every one for an enemy whom he met upon the road. On this account he always had his hat off, for which he was severely rebuked by D'Artagnan, who feared that this excess of politeness might cause Planchet to be taken for the valet of a man of little consequence. Nevertheless, whether the passengers were really softened by Planchet's extreme urbanity, or whether no enemies were stationed on the young man's path, our 2 travelers arrived, without any accident, at Chantilly, and dismounted at the tavern of the Great Saint Martin, the same at which they had stopped upon their last journey. The landlord, seeing a young man followed by a servant and 2 led horses, advanced respectfully to the door. Now, as he had already traveled 11 leagues, D'Artagnan judged that he had better stop here, whether Porthos was at the hotel or not. But it might not be prudent at first to make any inquiries about the Musketeer. The result of these reflections was that D'Artagnan, without asking any information from anybody, dismounted, recommended the horses to his servant's care, and entering a small room reserved for those who wished to be alone, called for a bottle of the best wine, and as good as breakfast as the landlord could supply, a call which corroborated the high estimate that the innkeeper had already formed of his guest at first sight. D'Artagnan was served with a celerity which was quite miraculous. The regiment of guards was composed of the first gentlemen of the realm, and D'Artagnan, traveling with a servant and 4 splendid horses, could not fail of creating a sensation in spite of the simplicity of his uniform. The host wished to wait on him himself, seeing which D'Artagnan made him bring 2 glasses, and began the following conversation. "By my faith, mine host," said D'Artagnan, filling 2 glasses, "I have asked for the best wine, and if you have deceived me, your sin will bring its own punishment, since, as I hate to drink alone, you are going to drink with me. Take this glass, then, and let us drink. To what shall we drink, that we may wound no one's feelings? Let us drink to the prosperity of your establishment. Your lordship does me great honor, and I sincerely thank you for your good wishes." "But don't deceive yourself," said D'Artagnan. "There is more selfishness in my toast than you think for. It is only in prosperous houses that one gets well treated. In struggling inns, everything runs to disorder, and the traveler is a victim to the landlord's embarrassment. Therefore, as I travel a great deal, and particularly on this road, I should like to see all the innkeepers making a fortune." "In fact," said the landlord, "it appears to me that this is not the first time I have seen you." "Bah! I've passed through Chantilly perhaps 10 times, and have stopped at least 3 or 4 times at your house. Yes, I was here about 10 or 12 days ago, conducting 3 of my friends, Musketeers, and one of them, by the by, quarreled with a stranger here, a man who sought to quarrel with him." "Ah, yes, true," said mine host. "I recollect it perfectly. Is it not of Monsieur Porthos that your lordship speaks? That is the very name of my traveling companion. Mon Dieu, my dear landlord, tell me, has any misfortune befallen him? But your lordship must have remarked for yourself that he was not able to continue his journey. In fact, he promised to overtake us, but we saw no more of him. He has done us the honor to remain here. What? He has done you the honor to remain here? Yes, sir, in this hotel, and we are somewhat uneasy over it. Why? On account of certain expenses that he has incurred. Well, but the expenses he has incurred he will pay. Ah, sir, your words are a positive balm to my heart. We have been at considerable expense on his account, and only this morning the surgeon declared that if Monsieur Porthos did not pay him, he should proceed against me, as it was I who sent for him. But is Porthos wounded, then? I cannot tell you, sir. What, you cannot tell me? You ought at any rate to know better than anybody else. Yes, but in our trade we do not tell all we know, sir, particularly when we have been warned that our ears shall answer for our tongue. Well, can I see Porthos? Certainly, sir. Go to the first landing place on the staircase and knock at number 1. Only advise him that it's you. What? Advise him that it's me? Yes, some accident might help something else. And what accident could happen to me? Monsieur Porthos might mistake you for somebody belonging to the house, and might, in a fit of passion, either run you through with his sword or blow out your brains. Why, what have you been doing to him, then? Oh, we asked him for money. Ah, I comprehend now. That is a kind of demand that Porthos always receives badly when he's not in cash, but I know that he ought to have plenty. So we thought also, sir, and as the house is very regular and our accounts are made up every week, on the 8th day we presented our little bill, but we seem to have hit upon an unlucky time, for at the first word we dropped upon the subject, he sent us all to the very devil. It is true that he had been playing cards on the evening before. What? Playing the evening before, and with whom? Oh, good Lord, who could tell that? With some nobleman who was traveling this way, and to whom he sent to propose a game at lansquenet. Just so, and the unlucky dog lost his all. Even to his horse, sir, for when the stranger was about to leave, we perceived that his servant was saddling Monsieur Porthos's horse, and we remarked it to him, but he told us that we had better mind our own business, and that the horse was his own. So we went immediately to let Monsieur Porthos know what was going on, but he only answered that we were scoundrels for doubting the word of a gentleman, and that as this one had said the horse belonged to him, it necessarily must be true. I recognize him there, exactly, muttered D'Artagnan. Then, continued the innkeeper, I sent a message to him that, as we did not seem likely to come to any understanding with one another about payment, I hoped that he would at least have the kindness to transfer the favor of his custom to my brother landlord at the Golden Eagle, but Monsieur Porthos replied that as my hotel was the best, he desired to remain here. This answer was too complimentary for me to insist upon his leaving. I contented myself with begging him to resign his apartment, which is the most beautiful in the house, and to be satisfied with a pretty little room upon the 3rd floor. But to this Monsieur Porthos replied that he was every moment expecting his mistress, who was one of the highest ladies at court, and that I ought to understand the chamber which he did me the honor to occupy in my house was scarcely good enough yet for such a visitor. Nevertheless, fully recognizing the truth of what he said, I felt it my duty to insist, but without condescending to enter into any discussion with me, he put a pistol on his night table and declared that at the first word which might be said to him about moving whatsoever, either out of the house or in it, he would blow out the brains of the person who had been imprudent enough to interfere in what did not concern him. So, since that time, sir, nobody has once entered his room but his own servant. Oh, Mousqueton is here, is he? Yes, sir. 5 days after his departure, he came back in a very ill humor. It seems that he also had met with some unpleasantry on his way, but he is unfortunately rather nimbler than his master, so that he turns everything topsy-turvy, and under the pretext that we might refuse him what he asks for, takes anything he wants without asking at all. The fact is, replied D'Artagnan, that I've always remarked in Mousqueton a very superior intelligence and zeal. Possibly so, sir, But if I should only find myself 4 times in a year in contact with a similar intelligence and zeal, I should be a bankrupt. No, Porthos will pay you. Exclaimed the innkeeper in a tone of doubt. He is the favorite of a lady of rank who will not allow him to remain in trouble on account of a trifle such as he owes you. If I only dared to say what I think about that. What do you think? I might say more, what I know. What you know? Or even what I'm quite sure of. And what are you so sure of? Come, say. I should say that I know about his lady of rank. You? Yes, me. And how came you to know about her? Oh, sir, if I thought I could depend on your discretion. Speak, and on the word of a gentleman you shall have no occasion to regret your confidence. Well, sir, can you understand that uneasiness makes one do many things? What have you done? Oh, nothing, but what a creditor has a right to do. Well, Monsieur Porthos had handed us a note for this duchess, giving us orders to put it in the post. It was before his own servant came, and as he could not leave his room, he was obliged to employ us in his commissions. What next? Instead of putting this letter in the post, which is uncertain, we took advantage of the occasion of one of our waiters going to Paris, and instructed him to deliver the letter to this duchess herself. That was fulfilling the intentions of Monsieur Porthos, who had particularly enjoined us to be careful of the letter, was it not? Nearly so. Well, sir, do you know what this lady of rank is? No, I have heard Porthos speak of her, that's all. Do you know what this pretended duchess is? I tell you again, I don't know her. She's an attorney's wife, an elderly woman called Madame Coquenard, who is at least 50 years of age and yet takes it upon herself to be jealous. It seems very strange to me, a princess living in the Rue d'Ars. How do you know this? Because she put herself in a great passion on receiving the letter, saying that Monsieur Porthos was a fickle man, and that it was on account of some woman that he had received the sword wound. Then he has received a sword wound, replied D'Artagnan. Ah, mon Dieu, what have I said? Cried the innkeeper. You said that Monsieur Porthos had received a wound from a sword. Yes, but he strongly enjoined me to say nothing about it. And why? Plague, sir, because he boasted that he would perforate the stranger with whom you left him in a dispute, whilst on the contrary this stranger stretched him on the ground, in spite of his rhodomontades. Now, as Monsieur Porthos is a very vain-glorious man, except toward his duchess, whom he thought to soften by an account of his misadventure, he is not disposed to admit to anybody that he is suffering from a wound. It is a sword wound, then, that keeps him in his bed, and a masterly one, I assure you. Your friend's soul must absolutely be pinned to his body. Were you there, then? I followed them, sir, from curiosity, so that I saw the combat myself invisible. And how did it happen? Oh, the thing did not take long, I assure you. They placed themselves on guard, the stranger made a feint and lunged, and that so rapidly that when Mr. Porthos parried, he had already 3 inches of steel in his chest. He fell back, the stranger put his sword to his throat, and Monsieur Porthos, seeing himself at the mercy of his adversary, confessed himself vanquished. The stranger then asked his name, and hearing that he was Monsieur Porthos and not Monsieur D'Artagnan, offered him his arm and led him back to the hotel, mounted on horseback, and disappeared. Then it was Monsieur D'Artagnan that the stranger wanted? It appears so. And do you know what has become of him? No, I have never seen him before that moment, and we've not seen him since. Very well, I know all I want. And you say that Monsieur Porthos's chamber is on the 1st floor, number 1? Yes, sir, the handsomest in the house, a chamber which I might have let 10 or a dozen times. Bah, cheer up, said D'Artagnan, laughing. Porthos will pay you with the case of the Duchess Coquenard. Oh, sir, attorney's wife or duchess would be no matter to me, if she would only unloosen her purse strings, but she's positively said that she is tired out by the inconstancies and exigencies of Monsieur Porthos, and that she will not send him even a sou. And did you communicate this reply to your guest? No, we were too careful for that. He would have found that the fashion in which we had executed our commission. Then he is still in expectation of the money. Mon Dieu, yes, he wrote again yesterday, but his own servant this time took the letter to the post. You say the attorney's wife is old and ugly. 50 years old at least, sir, and far from handsome, from what Patin says. Be comforted, then. Her heart will melt towards him, and at any rate Porthos cannot owe you much. What? Not much? It's 20 pistoles already, without reckoning the surgeon. Oh, he denies himself nothing. It is plain that he's always been accustomed to living well. Well, even if the Duchess should fail him, he will find friends, I can assure you. So, my dear landlord, do not disturb yourself, and continue to be the most attentive to his comfort. You've promised me, sir, not to say a word about the attorney's wife or the wound. That is agreed. You have my word. Oh, he would kill me, do you see? Do not be afraid. He is not half such a devil as he seems. Saying these words, D'Artagnan mounted the stairs, leaving the landlord a little more encouraged concerning two things, of which he appeared to think a good deal, his money and his life. At the top of the stairs, D'Artagnan found, on the most conspicuous door of the corridor, a gigantic number 1 marked with black ink. At this door he knocked, and being invited from within, entered the room. Porthos was lying down and playing at a lansquenet, with Mousqueton to keep his hand in, whilst a spit burdened with partridges was turning before the fire, and at the two corners of an immense chimney there were boiling on 2 chafing dishes 2 saucepans from which exhaled the double odor of fricasse of fowls and a hotchpotch of fish, which delighted the olfactory nerves. Besides, the top of a desk and the marble slab of a commode were covered with empty bottles. At the sight of his friend, Porthos uttered a loud and joyful cry, whilst Mousqueton, rising respectfully, gave up his place to him and went to glance into the 2 saucepans, which he appeared to have particular charge. "Ah, egad, it is you," said Porthos. "Welcome, welcome. Excuse me for not rising to meet you, but," added he, looking with some anxiety at D'Artagnan, "you know what has happened to me?" "No." "Has the innkeeper told you nothing?" "I asked for you and came up directly." Porthos appeared to breathe more freely. "And what has happened to you, then, my dear Porthos?" continued D'Artagnan. "It happened that, in lunging at my adversary, to whom I had already given 3 sword wounds, and whom I wished to finish by a 4th, my foot caught against a stone, and I sprained my knee." "Indeed!" "Yes, upon my honor. Lucky it was for the rascal, too, for I should otherwise have left him dead upon the spot, I assure you." "And what became of him?" "Oh, I know nothing about that. He had quite enough of it, and went away without asking for the reminder. But you, my dear D'Artagnan, what happened to you?" "So that," continued D'Artagnan, "it is this sprain that keeps you in bed, my dear Porthos." "Ah, mon Dieu, yes, that is all, but in a few days I shall be on my legs again." "But why did you not get yourself removed to Paris? You must have been sadly dull here." "It was my intention, but, my dear friend, I must confess one thing to you." "And what is that?" "It is that as I became cruelly dull, as you say, and as I had in my pocket the 75 pistoles which you provided me, I invited up a passing traveller and proposed to him a game of dice. He agreed, and faith, my 75 pistoles passed from my pocket into his, without reckoning my horse, which he carried off into the bargain. But you, my dear D'Artagnan?" "What would you have, my dear Porthos? You cannot be favored in all your pursuits," said D'Artagnan. "You know the proverb, lose at play and win at love. You are too fortunate in love for play not to revenge itself. But what do these changes of fortune signify to you? Happy dog, have you not still got your Duchess to assist you?" "Nay, look, my dear D'Artagnan, how unlucky I am," replied Porthos, in the most unconcerned tone in the world. "I have written to her to send me some 50 louis from which I have particular occasion in my present position." "Well?" "Well, she must be gone to her estate, for she sent me no answer." "Really?" "No, so I sent a second letter yesterday, rather more urgent than the first. But, my dear fellow, let us chat about your own affairs. I confess I was beginning to feel some uneasiness on your account." "But your host has behaved pretty well to you, apparently," said D'Artagnan, pointing to the teeming stew pans and the empty bottles. So, replied Porthos, "but it is only 2 or 3 days ago now since the impudent fellow brought me up his bill, and I showed them the door, both himself and his bill, so that I am now living here in something in the style of a conqueror. and as you see, being somewhat afraid of being attacked in my redoubts, I am armed to the very teeth." "Nevertheless," said D'Artagnan, laughing, "it seems that you sometimes make sorties." And he pointed to the stewpans and the bottles. "It is not me, unfortunately," said Porthos. "This miserable sprain keeps me in my bed, but Mousqueton there forages the country for supplies." "Mousqueton, my friend," continued Porthos, "you see that a reinforcement has arrived. We shall want an addition to our rations." "Mousqueton," said D'Artagnan, "there is a servant you must do me." "What is it, sir?" "To give you a recipe to planchette. I may chance to be besieged myself hereafter, and I should not at all be sorry to enjoy the advantages with which you gratify your master." "Oh, sir," said Mousqueton modestly, "nothing is more easy. One must be a little adroit, that is all. I was brought up in the provinces, and my father in his leisure moments was something of a poacher." "And how was he occupied in business hours?" "He was engaged in a pursuit, sir, which I have always found a very happy one." "What was that?" "As it was in the time of the wars between the Catholics and the Huguenots, and as he saw Catholics exterminating Huguenots and Huguenots exterminating Catholics, all in the name of religion, he had made for himself a sort of mixed belief which permitted him to be at one time a Catholic and at another a Huguenot. He had a habit of walking out behind the hedges on the roadside with his carbine at his shoulder, and when he saw a solitary Catholic coming, the Protestant religion immediately predominated in his mind. He lowered his carbine in the direction of the traveler, and then, when he was at 10 paces from him, opened a conversation which almost always ended by the traveler relinquishing his purse to redeem his life. Of course, when he saw a Huguenot coming, he was seized with such an ardent Catholic zeal that he could not comprehend how it had been possible for him only a quarter of an hour before to doubt the superiority of our most holy faith. For myself, sir, I am a Catholic, my father having, in conformity to his principles, made my elder brother a Huguenot." "And what was the end of the worthy man?" asked D'Artagnan. "Most unfortunate, sir. He found himself caught in a defile between a Catholic and a Huguenot, with whom he had done some business previously, and they both recognized him, so they united against him and hung him off a tree. And then they came and boasted of their foolish work in the very wine shop in the village where my brother and I were drinking." "And what did you do?" asked D'Artagnan. "We let them talk," replied Mousqueton. "Then, as they went opposite roads when they left the wine shop, my brother posted himself in the path of the Catholic, and I lay in wait for the Protestant. It was all settled 2 hours after. We had done the business of both of them, admiring the forethought of our poor father, who had taken the precaution to educate us each in a different faith." "In fact, as you say, Mousqueton, your father seems to have been a very intelligent fellow. And you tell me that the worthy man was, in his leisure moments, a poacher?" "Yes, sir, and it was he who taught me to set a snare and fix a night line. The consequence was that when I found our shabby landlord was feeding us on coarse meats, fit possibly for clowns, but not at all suitable to stomachs so delicate as ours, I had recourse again to my old trade. As I sauntered through the woods, I laid my snares in the paths, and as I reclined beside the water, I slipped my lines into the ponds. In this way, thank God, we have experienced no scarcity, as you may be satisfied, sir, of partridges or rabbits or carps or eels, and these are light and wholesome viands, highly suitable to sick persons." "But wine," said D'Artagnan. "Your landlord furnishes the wine?" "That is to say," answered Mousqueton, "yes and no." "What? Yes and no?" "He furnishes it, it is true, but he is unconscious of honor." "Explain yourself, Mousqueton. Your conversation is deep." "That is the way of it. It chanced that in my wanderings I met with a Spaniard who had seen many countries and, amongst others, the New World." "And what connection can there be between the New World and those bottles on the desks and drawers?" "Patience, sir. Everything will come in its turn." "That is fair, Mousqueton. I trust to you, and listen. This Spaniard had a servant who had accompanied him on his voyage to Mexico. This servant was a compatriot of mine, and as we became attached to one another the more quickly, as our characters were much alike, we were both particularly fond of hunting, and he related to me how in the Pampas the natives hunt tigers and bulls, simply with nooses of rope which they throw over the necks of these terrible animals. At first I would not believe that they could attain to so great a degree of address as to throw the end of a rope on what they wished at the distance of 20 or 30 paces, but with the proof before me I was obliged to recognize the truth of his recital. My friend placed a bottle at 30 paces off, and at each throw caught it by the neck in a running noose. I practiced this exercise, and as nature has given me some capacity, I can now throw the lasso as well as any man in the world. Well, do you understand? Our landlord has a well-furnished cellar, of which he never loses sight of the key. But this cellar has an air hole, and through that air hole I threw the lasso, and as I now know the best corner, I always draw from thence. This is the connection, sir, between the New World and the bottles on the desk and drawers. And now will you taste our wine, and without prejudice, you will tell us what you think of it? Thanks, my friend, thanks, but I've already breakfasted. Well, said Porthos, make all ready, Mousqueton, and whilst we breakfast, D'Artagnan will tell us what has happened to him during the 10 days that he has been absent from us. Whilst Porthos and Mousqueton breakfasted with all the appetite of convalescence, and that brotherly familiarity which draws men together in misfortune, D'Artagnan related that Aramis, being wounded, had been obliged to stop at Crèvecoeur, that he had left Athos fighting at Amiens with 4 men who accused him of being a coiner, and that he himself had been compelled to run the Count de Vardes through the body in order to reach England. But there the confidence of D'Artagnan ended. He merely announced that on his return from England, he had brought 4 splendid horses with him, one for himself and one for each of their companions, and he concluded by informing Porthos that the one destined for him was already in the stables of the hotel. At this moment Planchet entered. He intimated to his master that the horses were sufficiently refreshed, and that it would be possible to go to Claremont in time to pass the night there. As D'Artagnan was pretty well satisfied as to Porthos's state, and was anxious to gain some information concerning his 2 other friends, he gave his hand to the invalid and told him that he should now proceed to continue his inquiries. And as he expected to return by the same road if Porthos, or in 7 or 8 days, was still at the hotel of the great Saint-Martin, he would take him up upon his way. Porthos answered that in all probability his sprain would confine him till that time, and moreover he must wait at Chantilly for a reply from the Duchess. D'Artagnan wished him a speedy and favorable one, and after having again commended him to the care of Mousqueton, and paid the landlord his own expenses, he once more took the road with Planchet, who was already relieved of one of the led horses.